All right. So what is for resistance training for fighting? What are the modalities you like? So do you prefer free weights? Do you like kettlebells? What's your preference?
Well, yeah, resistance training. All weight is resistance, isn't it? So push-ups is resistance training.
Yeah.
It's weight training. It's that sort of stuff. But I think to look at it, what I like is um, you got to look at the protocol of, am I going really heavy for less reps to build strength? Am I going light? I think that very few things in life work out to be a 1 rep max event.
Yeah.
So one of the big things I train for a lot is the muscular endurance aspect. So a couple of reasons for that. I mean, one of the reasons is I think it's more relevant for what we're doing. For we're not doing one big lift. We're going to be doing lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff. It's going to be constant effort. So I want to have the ability to process that level of effort and be able to continue, not just get ultra pumped and I can't move anymore, or get ultra fatigued or whatever. So muscular endurance is a big deal, I think. So I'll do higher reps than say most. I'll do in the range of 20s to 30s, 40s, 50, 100 reps even sometimes on some exercises, which is but obviously that affects how much weight you're going to lift, obviously.
Yeah.
So I very rarely, if you said to me now, what's your max bench or I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Because I haven't trained that way for so long now. I got no idea,
Yeah.
But what I do know is with this amount of weight, I can do a set of 50.
Yeah.
Or I can do a set of 100 with this amount of weight, So I prefer that. Kettlebells, yeah, completely always liked kettlebells. I think the good thing about kettlebells that I really liked back in the day was it was a completely different way of lifting because it was quick. You had to be explosive with it because you're not so much lifting them as throwing them around, aren't you? In a lot of ways.
Momentum.
Like with
momentum based.
Like with the snatch and the swing, it's a throw. You're throwing the thing. I mean, the swing should be called a fling because you're literally flinging it forward, aren't you? Just holding onto the thing,
And then the catching of it too. Yeah, shock absorption, catching it.
Yeah,
as well. So,
I like that element, and in the way I train with weights and cables and bands and things, I do train faster. I don't like people talk about pure hypertrophy. It's a 2-second positive and a 4-second negative phase, and I'm like, no, I just don't. I work a lot faster. I think, look, you want to get fast, you got to work fast. Simple as that.
So that's where velocity-based training has become popular.
Yeah.
Just the speed of the lifts and things like that, and trying to utilize a weight that makes you lift it, half a second to complete a rep is optimal, as opposed to heavy. That's
probably the fastest guys in say the Olympics would be the Olympic lifters.
Yeah.
People don't realize how fast those guys are moving.
Yeah.
And they just got to move that fast, otherwise the weights wouldn't go up. They've got to inject so much momentum into that weight that it goes up by itself almost. What I like about that is it means that you've got to really focus on that initial part of the lift to overcome inertia.
Yeah.
Like with say a kettlebell snatch. If you don't yank that thing off the floor hard to start with, you're going to run out of momentum halfway, and you're not going to get the weight up.
Yeah.
So it really makes you work hard from the get-go, and I like that. I don't like that kind of steam-powered building up pressure. Eventually I'm pushing hard. It's like when you throw a punch. That's one of the classic things I see when people hit. They waste that first part of the punch building up speed rather than starting with a violent movement.
Yeah.
It's not about finishing with a violent movement. It's about starting with a violent movement. If you really want to hit hard, how fast is the platform moving to start with? That's the thing.
Yeah. And I like too, like what you're saying, is utilizing full body within a movement as opposed to isolation. Like there's definitely a place for isolation. And I think this whole model is different for everyone. So some people need to do speed strength, others strength speed. And people respond differently to different things. But utilizing as many muscles as possible within a movement is more specific for fighting. Because you're not punching it. You don't throw a punch like a bench press. There's rotation, there's hips, there's legs are in it, there's everything. So
I think the biggest tip that I try and give people on a regular basis really is stop training like a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Now, that was my introduction to weight training. I knew nothing about weight training. I mean, I was a, kung fu superhero when I was a kid. So it was all push-ups and sit-ups and calisthenic stuff that you do in your average martial arts classes, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Actual getting hold of weights and training in a proper gym was alien to me. So I just basically, my introduction was copying people who were doing bodybuilding training. So that
Yeah.
was, and I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd seen an Olympic lifting
Yeah.
club. I wish that had been my introduction, but it wasn't. So my biggest thing I give people at the moment is, stop training like a bodybuilder, start training like an athlete.
Yeah.
That's simple as that. There's nothing,
Yeah.
like you say, isolation training is fantastic, I think, for working around injuries or if you've got a weak point.
Yeah.
Nobody knows how the body works better than a bodybuilder because they can isolate any muscle.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
point at one and they've got an exercise that will hit that. They're great for that.
Yeah.
So I think that's very useful for like rehabbing and prehabbing stuff and whatever. But other than that, I stopped training muscles. People say, "Oh, is it chest day today?" And I don't do that. I train movements more
Yeah.
than muscles. So I'll train pushing movements, pulling movements, twisting movements,
Yeah.
bending. I'll work
Yeah.
in those
Yeah.
profiles rather than specific muscle groups. You know, so I train the movement, not the muscle,
Yeah.
which gets to what you just said there about bringing in multi-planar movement in something. You're not just pushing with your arm, you're twisting as well, and
Yeah.
you're stepping forward as you do that. And that's, you start to learn how to move, don't you? That's it. You're
Yeah.
training how to move rather than
Yeah.
just training a muscle group. So I'm very much into that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
for
you can
sure.
see it in athletes as well. Like, and I'm not singling out bodybuilders, but people that train like that, there's just no connection. They have trouble getting more leg into a punch or things like that. And that's one thing. Like, I've worked as a strength and conditioning coach now for a long time, and initially, like, I believe, like, if I look at what I do, I have to do the bodybuilding, particularly now as I'm older. Um, being sick and that, I lost a lot of weight. I've got to put that back on. And to me, it's like body armor. I need that
Mm,
body armor. That's
mm.
important. But I'm also doing days, like we said, where I've got the Viking press out. I'm doing a split press or something along those lines to get, everything going. I do all the rotational stuff. I do, you name it, just to piece it all together. And like you said, yeah, you got to train like an athlete.
I think
No two
Liam is
ways
the
about
best.
it.
The one that I always point people at, the athlete, the discipline I always point people at is, tell people, go online and look for videos of like wrestling conditioning.
Hmm.
Not even if you're not interested in doing wrestling as such.
Yeah,
Maybe you're a striker or something, but I think that nobody trains as hard as a wrestler, in my
no,
opinion. As physical specimens, the control they have over their body and the strength they have, I think is phenomenal. And I think that would be um, my aspiration. That's what I would say to somebody is,
yeah,
look at how wrestlers train. If you're doing anything similar to that, you're probably going in the right direction.
yeah,
But again, we're getting back to, how do you train for a fight? Well, look at how professional fighters train for a fight. Because
yeah, yeah,
if it wasn't effective, they wouldn't be professional fighters. So they're onto something there. Don't
yeah,
try and reinvent the wheel or find something new. You know, they're probably doing it. And
yeah,
anything new you're probably thinking about, they've probably tried it already.
yeah,
So I think it's not a hard one. You know,
yeah.
it's an easy question for me to answer. I just point at somebody else and say, like him.
Look at that.
Because
Yeah,
who am I to say, that guy's a world champion, train like that guy? But that's the
yeah,
funny thing as well, isn't it? It's like you've got to be very careful what you look at, because I think we talked about this before. Let's say like Floyd Mayweather, the pad
his
drills that everybody
pads.
likes to copy. He
Yeah,
doesn't train like that. If people think that, yeah, but I saw him do this and that means I'll train like him. He says it himself. He does that for the press conference because
yeah,
it's fun, it's cool, it makes people talk and it makes people go, wow. He doesn't train like that. He
yeah,
admits it himself that people still want to train like that,
yeah, yeah,
and they'll
yeah,
still point logical fallacy. Well, he trains like that, therefore, and he's the world champion. So
yeah,
correlation
yeah,
equals causation.
yeah,
I must train like that, and I'll be the world champion. So it's
yeah,
like, don't look at the YouTube videos of guys doing the flash stuff. You know,
yeah.
You know, nobody puts things on YouTube that's boring.
No.
You know, they don't put, you know, the athlete doesn't put himself doing 500 reps or something on YouTube because it's boring. He puts that one cool thing he did with his trainer at the end of the day. That's the thing that goes on YouTube. So
Yeah.
be careful about what you watch on YouTube. But generally speaking, wrestlers, they've probably got
Can't
the
go
best
wrong.
conditioning out there, I think. You
Yeah,
know,
definitely.
you're not going to
It's
go
fun.
far
Yeah.
wrong if you copy them, those
Yeah.
guys.
And it's funny, you look at a lot of what they do, there's not any intricate equipment or things like that. And it brings me back. When I opened a gym once, it was going to be all, kettlebells, Bulgarian bags, all the rest of the stuff without actual equipment. And I was going to call it the body gym, where the only machine in the gym is you. That was my sort of little philosophy, but then I didn't follow through with it. But yeah, I just think that's how it should be. Like I was saying, a whole body, movement's key.
Well,
Mimicking movements in the right manner.
if you look at something, I mean, you could talk, if you're talking specific exercises. So everybody will say, what's the king of exercises? And they'll say the squat or the deadlift, for instance. Okay. However, if you look about how, I mean, to use that word functional, which has been corrupted,
Yeah,
functional means fit for purpose or fit for something, will it perform a function? Is it that? The squat isn't actually very functional. It builds a lot of immense strength, base strength. But if you look at the actual movement you're doing in a squat, when do you do that movement?
yeah,
Most of your life isn't a squat, is it? It's sitting
no,
down, standing up, going on the toilet, maybe that's it. But
yeah,
the lunge would be the
yeah.
functional leg movement.
So I was
So
gonna say, I always get up with one leg every time.
yeah, but lunging, well, that's walking upstairs. That's when you're fighting and taking when you're shooting in on a double leg, it's all a
Yeah,
lunge. So, you know, you could start thinking about why am I squatting and not lunging?
yeah. And that split stance as well. That's how you fight generally.
Yeah.
It
So
makes
it's
total
little
sense.
things like that. And it's like bench pressing, for instance. Okay, fine, pushing things, but we tend not to work in a bilateral fashion. We tend to push with one arm, step forward with one leg.
Yeah,
We don't tend to work symmetrically, do we? So I
no,
do a lot of stuff that's one-handed.
yeah,
I do a lot of stuff that's one-legged,
yeah,
on purpose because it forces your body to adapt
yeah,
to the odd loading it's got, things like that. So I do a lot of that stuff as well. So one
yeah,
dumbbell rather than two dumbbells,
yeah,
that sort of stuff. Um, say lunging, even that deadlifting. Deadlifting is fantastic. Are you gonna do a deadlift in that actual format in life? Probably not. But you got to look at what am I trying to build? Am I trying to build base strength or am I going to try and build specific strength?
yeah,
Nothing wrong with both. Nothing wrong building base strength. There's nothing wrong with being good at squatting, good at deadlifting, good at bench pressing. But if you're going to start talking about being specific, you can start adapting it a little bit as well. You
yeah,
know, one-handed stuff, lunging stuff. You know,
yeah,
um, I think there's a lot of mileage in that.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
working movements, not muscles.
yeah, 100%. Right, the last one, and I'll cut these as well. So the mistakes. All right, so the next one is mistakes you've made in the training. So if you could go back in time, what are some of the errors that you did that you
Again,
wish you hadn't?
I,
I've
I
got
mentioned it
thousands.
earlier that my introduction to weight training was by looking at guys who were doing the classic bodybuilder type of body split stuff.
Yeah,
So for quite a long time, when I was younger, that was my also preferred thing. I wish way back I'd got into Olympic lifting.
yeah,
I mean, way back when I was starting doing that, the kettlebells were unheard of. At least in the West anyway.
yeah,
So that wasn't an issue. But Olympic lifting would have given me that better control, I think, of my body, that explosiveness. I just find it fantastic, and I just find it, probably too technical for me now. I think I'm too broken at the
it
start,
hurts a
and
bit.
I'm a
Yeah,
bit
it hurts a
old as well, I
bit.
think. But I really wish that, yeah, I hadn't copied bodybuilders, I'd copied Olympic lifters. I
Yeah,
wish at the
yeah,
time I'd have done more of that. Um, that's my biggest thing, really, is training in a bodybuilder kind of fashion.
Yeah.
and I didn't get good enough at moving. I got stiff. You know,
Yeah.
I wish I'd trained more athletically back then. Which is why I always tell people now, don't train like a bodybuilder, train like an athlete. Start
Yeah.
looking at how athletes train, you know, start copying that. Like most athletes, as far as I'm aware, don't touch heavy deadlifts. They don't do them. They do power cleans,
Yeah.
but they don't do deadlift because
No.
the risk versus reward doesn't give them what they need. It doesn't give them that speed, that snap, that power.
Yeah.
And the risk of injury is too great when you start putting on some big loads. You
Yeah.
can take yourself out of the game for months, can't you, with a bad
Yeah.
deadlift, you know?
Yeah.
So it's things like that, you know, train like an athlete. Think about what the stuff they're doing. So they're not doing bench pressing and deadlifting, they're doing power cleans and lunges, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I wish I'd got into more of that.
Yeah.
More, I wish I'd stayed with the calisthenics a little bit longer as well. You know, some of the people that impressed me immensely, you know, anything gymnastic,
Yeah. I
um,
was going to say that too. Yeah.
anything, anything when you're seeing them doing all the muscle ups on the bars and things like that, you know.
The iron cross and all that is just insane. Also,
Yep,
how explosive and big they are. Like they're some of the
yep,
athletes that I admire the most as gymnasts. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so really, that's that. I mean, other than the general stuff of being young and stupid, and you know, having a hold my beer mentality in the gym, basically, you know, that
Yeah.
that caused a lot of problems. But biggest kind of mistake for me, I think, is not balancing my training enough. That, for instance, my psoas muscles, my hip flexor muscles, are ridiculously tight to the point where I don't think I'd fix them with surgery now, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah. Shit.
And that has ruined me in a lot of ways. That I don't have the movement in my body that I should have because I can't get the hip extension that I should have because my hip flexors are just like concrete, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had ended up with bad anterior tilt and things like that. So being more balanced in how I trained, I think would have been more beneficial when I was younger. So I always stress to people now is train for balance.
Yeah.
You know, if you had a watch and you tightened up just one spring inside that watch too much, you fuck the whole watch up.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
it.
you
Yeah.
need that balance. You need
Snowballs.
yeah, you need to have some muscles are longer, some muscles are shorter. You need to balance it all out, you know, and work the smaller muscles more than just the big disco muscles,
That's it.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
things like, you know, bulletproof your rotator cuff, for instance.
Yeah.
Don't wait until you've injured it before you start training it.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
it.
you
Two
know, it's things like
instructions
that.
here. Yeah.
You know, a lot of my training has been very reactive. That I'm now trying to fix things that I fucked up when I was younger. You know,
Yeah.
so I wish if I had that rewind, I could rewind back and either not do that particular thing or start doing the stuff I'm using now to fix myself back then. So
Yeah.
I didn't end up breaking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So start bulletproofing your shoulders. You know,
Yeah.
training balance.
Heaps.
You know, yeah,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
find yourself if you get really good at one exercise, stop doing it and start doing the ones
Yeah.
you're not very good at. That's a big
Yeah.
thing.
That's a big sign. If you hate doing something, it's probably what you should be doing.
Big time. Big
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Weak point training, they call that, don't they? Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like you see guys go in the bag and they'll work their favorite shots on the bag, but you ask them to do it with the left hand, they don't want to because
Yeah. Yeah.
we all like doing things that make us feel good.
Yeah.
And usually things that make us feel good are things that we're good at.
Yeah.
So it becomes a negative cycle, doesn't it? You get better and better at the things that you're already good at, which means then
Yeah.
you also get worse and worse at the things you're not very good at. And as we know, Murphy's Law probably means that's the only thing you're going to get a chance to do in a fight is the
Yeah.
thing that you're not very good at. And you're not good at it because you never trained it. And you
Yeah.
never trained it because you're not good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny
So a lot of
that.
that again.
Yeah. There's a running joke here that I always train with closed doors, and I do it when there's no one around, like unless it's like training partners and whatever. And they make a joke that I'm in there training naked, but it's because I'm working at things that I'm shit at. You know, I'm working at things I can't do very well, and I don't want that person's opinion of me to be based off
Yeah.
that. You know, so I'm in there, and it's human nature. Like when I had a gym that had a big frontage where a lot of people walk past, people would only do what they, like you said, what they're good at. because there was people there, and the best thing I did was move away from that place.
So with the three planes of movement in the body, yeah.
Yeah,
Which one gets worked the most? Which plane of movement?
yeah, it'd be the front foot, wouldn't it?
So
Yeah,
sagittal plane, to get scientifical about it all, right?
yeah,
You know why? Because it's the one you can see in a mirror.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it's the old joke, isn't it? That everything is
Yeah,
sagittal plane, sagittal plane, but every sport, most of it comes from the transverse plane and
yeah,
twisting.
exactly.
You
Yeah,
know what I mean? And that's one of the things I'd say. That's probably something I also wish I'd done more of. It would be more rotational work
yeah,
when I was young. But you're young, you want to look good in a disco, so
yeah.
you, it's all bench press and squat and shoulder raises and
Curls get the
overhead press.
girls.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Whereas really, you look at sports, it's very, very focused on rotational work, isn't it? Because
yeah,
where does all
yeah,
the power come from? Power comes from that spinal engine.
yeah,
There's two forms of power mainly in any kind of physical activity. And one is lateral shift of weight from one foot to the other. And the other one is rotation, torque.
yeah, yeah.
So why aren't we training that more?
Yeah, 100%. That's where I've survived because I have good rotational strength. If I go in a gym and bench press, not impressive. If you get me to hit a golf ball, I can hit it for miles. I can
That's the
throw a
one.
ball. I can wrestle. It's yeah. It's the only way I've survived is a
Yeah, yeah,
rotational strength. Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Yeah,
mine's a
that's
bit
something I
different.
wish I'd
Like
done a lot more of. Yeah.
yeah, I sort of cottoned on to that early. It was funny. I was working as an accountant. I was studying accounting and hated it. And then I went and started doing fitness courses and things like that. And then I thought, like, because I really like my basketball and my fighting, I was like, how can I jump higher? How can I do this? And back in those days, you couldn't get information. I had to go to the sports science library. I'd borrow a stack of books for about a month, photocopy, and I'd get in there and I'd copy it. So yeah, I did a lot on that rotation, thankfully, and that was one thing I was happy about. But mine, the way I periodized my training, that was the biggest mistake I think I made. So I would always train heavy. So I would do strength, a strength cycle. Then I would do, strength, speed, strength. And then I'd have a fight and I'd never do a hypertrophy one. And I believe that's why I'm so messed up today, my elbows, shoulders, and things, because I never took the time to do more than 6 reps was the max I ever did
Oh,
for
really?
20 years. And I think that's why
There are schools of
today I
thought though
messed
that
up.
say you can wear yourself out by doing high reps. There are schools of thought
Yeah,
for that. You know,
yeah,
I think bottom line is you're going to wear yourself out no matter what. That's called life, isn't it? To be
yeah,
quite honest,
yeah,
But I personally register the best results when I train with medium to light weights, but
yeah,
for lots of reps and lots of sets. To be
yeah,
quite, I find myself getting better results from that with less chance of injury.
yeah.
You
Oh, for
know, if
sure.
if, if I was say we pick the bench press, if I'm bench pressing 60 kilos, which is, you know, nothing to kind of boast about at all, until you do one set of 50 reps with it,
Yeah,
that's tough,
yeah,
you
I
know,
agree. Yeah,
you know what I mean? But also 60 kilos probably isn't going to tear any muscle I've got,
no,
you know, it's not heavy enough,
yeah,
you know. If I dropped it, it probably won't kill me. You
yeah,
know what I mean? It won't be pleasant, but I'm not going to die from it. But I've always found that when I used to press heavier, when you started getting into, into three figures and whatever, that's when the injuries start
yeah,
appearing. Because now that weight is enough to tear a muscle or
yeah,
a ligament or or a tendon. And if you did drop it, you would die. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
you drop 150 kilos on your neck from a
It's
bench
over.
press, well, you're dead. That's it. You're not going to
Yeah,
survive that.
yeah,
You know, you drop it on your chest, it's going to damage you, whatever. And also, they say the weight. So even with deadlift, when I occasionally do deadlift, I won't go heavy. I'll go 80 kilos, but I'll work in sets of 30.
yeah. Because how many
There's
videos you
nothing.
see of people's tendons rupturing doing a
Oh,
deadlift? There's hundreds of
oh,
them out there.
that's always a fear of mine, that is tearing a bicep. Every time I get a funny feeling in my bicep, I'm always terrified I'm going to tear my bicep. Yeah, I don't like it. But I just get better results from that, me personally. Some people don't.
Yeah.
Some people, are far better off far better at lifting heavy than I am. But then on the flip side of that, when I do train with somebody else and we do higher rep stuff, I can usually leave them standing on the higher rep stuff. So I
Yeah.
also just figure out that that's more representative of a fight.
Yeah.
He's been able to sustain effort for longer.
Yeah.
Because people always say, yeah, I'll just knock him out with one punch. And it's like, okay, after you've had a couple of fights, you realize that it does work, it does occur, but it's not,
Yeah.
there's no guarantee of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And more often than not, it's going to be a struggle.
Yeah.
And if you gas out too early in that struggle, you get beat. As simple as
Yeah.
that. Quite often your skill levels will be identical to the other guy.
Yeah.
And it's who's got the most in the tank, physically and mentally.
Yeah.
But you can't often rely on beating a guy with skill.
Yeah. Yeah.
People will crucify me for saying that, but I'm sorry, but it's just the way it is. The unskilled people are good at knocking people out. They're good
Yeah.
at beating people in fights. So,
We've seen it too many times.
Yep.
One other big mistake I made was my dad was a Jeet Kune Do instructor. So therefore I switched to Southpaw, even though I'm Orthodox.
I did a lot of that.
And yeah, that was a mistake. Also, just basically going through the Tao of Jeet Kune Do and using that as my Bible, huge mistake. There's some good in it, don't get me wrong, but just a lot of the training and things, I wish I stayed Orthodox as opposed to chaining. Funny thing is, like I've done thousands upon thousands of hours in a Southpaw stance, but when things go real, I go back to Orthodox because that's natural. Like there's things like that
No, I had that exact same thing with me. I was very much enamored with that strong hand forward approach, and that was from reading Bruce Lee books and things like that. And I would argue it, and in sparring, I was good at that as well because it does give you a your best hand is closer and it's got the most angles and it works great for sparring. But then when I was getting into actual situations, and that was as a young guy basically being stupid or working on the door or whatever, it just didn't work. And you end up sacrificing your best hand holding a guy off you, and then you've got your weakest hand is the only one you've got available for doing something. So I had to basically accept that I was wrong and say, no, actually, yeah. On that one though, I mean, which is slightly off topic, I do find it quite funny that we've got all these progressive super combat systems that we're training, and we all kind of denigrate a lot of the traditional martial arts a little bit, run them down. But even if you take something like Shotokan karate, the first kata that you learn in there, everything is done ambidextrous.
Yeah.
Every single thing. So the whole kata is about a block here and a punch there, and then you switch sides and do the same block and the same punch from the opposite side. So in a lot of ways, they're a lot more progressive than guy who can only fight orthodox.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing to look at. It's just that they had that right from the outset, that the day chooses you, doesn't it? You can't pick how you want to have that fight. What's your stance going to be? Well, however you happen to be at the time.
That's it.
That was just as an interesting aside that, as much as we talk about how progressive we are, we're not maybe as progressive as we think we are. Because
and not to mention
how many people out there train completely ambidextrously?
Yeah.
Most people don't. Most people stand in a certain way. So in my opinion, you've got to be a switch hitter. You've got to be able to fight both sides, my opinion.
That's the one thing that did for me. I can now, either side, and I do train either side, and and decent at both sides. So it was good in that respect. The other thing that I did wrong was hitting really heavy, hard things consistently, like my knees. I've got no meniscus. Sorry, the cartilage under my meniscus on one side is not there because I just disintegrated from kneeing those hard pads, hard bags, and shooting without knee pads. It's funny how you said reactionary. I started wearing knee pads after I had the surgery, instead of prior. So that was a big mistake. And doing the splits, like when I grew up, if you could do the splits, you were tough. So I used to spend 45 minutes with like a noose, pulling my leg up in any direction. I could do this, the Van Dam over the chairs. I could do that.
Oh
And now
no.
I've been told I need a hip replacement by the time I'm 60 because of it. So
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, again,
Hindsight.
isn't it? It's experience is that thing you get right after you really needed it.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
Yeah,
All
right
this
after.
stuff I wish I knew when I was 20. All of this stuff. If only.
Yeah, but you know, life has its own wear and tear no matter what you do, doesn't it? That's the thing.
Yeah,
All I know is that the stuff I'm doing in the gym now to fix myself, I wish I'd done it earlier,
yeah,
as well as the other stuff,
yeah,
but I wasn't interested at the time. I was just interested in the usual stuff. How much can I lift,
yeah,
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I wasn't thinking for the future. I wasn't thinking about where's this going to go, you
yeah,
know, and I wasn't filling in the gaps in my training. I was strong in this position and this position, but I wish I'd done more rotational work. I wish I'd done more funny angle type of working.
yeah,
And again, I wish I hadn't trained like a bodybuilder, basically.
yeah,
I wish I trained more like an athlete. So
yeah,
that's what I tell everybody now: train like an athlete. You know,
yeah,
train to move.
yeah,
That's the thing. Don't if we looked at something like, say, for instance, the squat. People think about the squat as being that bar going up and down, and it isn't. The squat is about your hips going up and down and how much your legs bend.
mm,
The bar is just an accessory that you use to make the squat more difficult. So
yeah,
people think more about the weight than the actual movement. And that's why you see people doing a funny ass squat that looks more like a good morning, because in their mind the bar has gone up and down, therefore they did a squat.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see that
Rather
and then just
than you look at them and you think, yeah, but your legs didn't bend. So
yeah,
how was that a squat? You
yeah,
know?
that's it.
Or people doing push-ups without bending their arms, but their
Yeah,
head's going up and down.
yeah,
So you can imagine that in that guy's mind he thinks he's doing a push-up. But you got to look at what the movement is.
yeah,
So I started doing that more. I started looking at the movements and just adding weight to it to make the movement more difficult, but not focusing on the weight,
yeah,
focusing on the movement.
yeah,
That added a lot to my training. And I
yeah,
found that I could use less weight because the movement was hard enough.
yeah,
I always say to people, when people say, "Oh, how much can you squat?" And I say, "Look, I won't even talk about it because I guarantee how I do a squat is different to how you do a squat. So let's not make a competition out of that."
yeah,
And when they tell me, I says, "Do you go all the way down?" And they'll say, "Oh yeah, I go all the way." And you watch them, and they don't go all the way down. And I says, "If you had less weight, could you go further down?" And the answer will be yes. So what does
yeah,
that tell me? All you've done is you've made the exercise easier so you can lift more weight. I don't want to get good at lifting weights. I
yeah.
want to get good at that movement.
Yeah, that's one of the big things too, as a strength and conditioning coach, particularly basketball. My job is to correct the imbalances occurring in the game, not to smash them so that they can't do their actual training or play their games. Like you got to be careful about programming so that they're not too sore for training. Because what's the important thing? Like I look at, say, my son who's playing at the moment. If I train him and he's too sore for training, coaches kind of look at him and go, he's not that good. I'm not going to put him in the game next week.
Oh yeah.
Or if I make him too sore for the game, it's about it's complementary. It's not everything.
Well,
And that's
that's
another thing I wish I did differently.
yeah, that comes in as
Yeah.
well how I train at the moment. I'll train a little and often
Yeah.
rather than huge big sessions because I can't afford, operationally you can't afford to have crippling DOMs
Yeah.
that mean you can't get out of a car fast.
Yeah.
Or if somebody pokes you in the chest that you'll collapse, in tears
Yeah.
because you're so sore. So I won't really train. I mean, people, purists will say, well, you're not getting the overload you need then for hypertrophy, or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I appreciate that, but also I've got to be operationally viable. I can't be
Yeah.
so sore that I can't work. So again, people always think as well how athletes train that what they must train 10 hours a day, and you don't realize how they don't. They
No.
do a lot more rest than they do training,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But you got to look. People assume and they
Yeah.
make up how they think a fighter's going to train or how they think some special operator kind of trains, and it's not how they actually do. They train a lot more intelligently than a lot of people think,
Yeah.
and people think that they must be so macho and all that. Not that at all. athletes have got very boring training when you look at them how they do it. You know, there's nothing cool and exciting about anything they do, and it's all done for a reason, though. You know, and it's all intelligently based, isn't it?
Yeah. Like you look at Usain Bolt training, and I'm not saying his training isn't difficult, but the rest periods that he has between his sets and things like that is huge. Granted, he generates that much force that no other human can do the same, but as a workout, it wouldn't be that difficult, you know, to do what he did within our capacity. So
that's the thing, because he doesn't want to get good at training.
Yeah.
He wants to get good at something else, and the training is a stepping stone to getting good at something else. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's a bit like with the martial arts stuff. Do you want to get good at the drill? And that's where a lot of people do. They chase how good they can do a drill. And one of the first things I'll say to anybody is you'll never get good at any of the drills I design, because the moment you start getting good at them, I'll just change them. I'll make them more difficult. I'll increase, I'll scale them up for you. And there are too many systems out there that have got amazing looking drills, but then people just do get good at that drill. It's like getting good at lifting a weight. That means that you're not getting anything from it now. The moment you get good at a drill, that drill's pretty useless now. It's not doing anything for you, apart from maybe validating your ego or whatever. But you've got to look at the overload. It's got to be progressive, which means it's got to increase. It's got to keep going, you know? And the way, you know, athletes train is they don't want to get good at lifting a weight. But the way a lot of people train in the gym is they do want to get good at lifting a weight. And the heavier weight makes them feel better. So they'll change the exercise to make them able to lift that heavier weight. So